Hi everyone. You're still awake then? I was dreading this slot. I thought they'll all be dozing off. And anyway, I thought it's just about how did I get here, really. It's worth saying because, as you know, I was lead author of MSP and also P3M3. And so just about where did my journey start? I was in the BBC in around the late 90s, and I got involved in a major restructuring. And I'd already been down the project road, so I'd kind of been on this journey you've been on. And I got the job of bringing structure to it, because I'd already fixed some stuff in the IT area using project management. And I remember looking at this restructuring with 60 or 70 different projects. We'd call it a portfolio now more than a program. And thinking, actually, I haven't got a clue how to do this. But I've actually flogged the idea to the board, so I've got the job. And I was really fortunate. My wife was working for Atkins up at GCHQ. And, you know, as you do, you had a bit of a moan one night. I'm not really sure I'm going to cope with this. And she came back with a copy of what was then the brand new version of MSP, 99, and put it in front and said, is that any good? You know, like wives do. And I picked it up and I thought, this is exactly what I've got. Yeah, the leadership team have got a vision. They're talking benefits, and it just worked. And that's how I got into MSP. And I left the BBC in the early 90s to set up a company dedicated to programme management, because to me, it covered all the things I'd learned about service management, project management, and business change, and marketing and stakeholder. It was all there in one place. Unfortunately, the rest of the world thought MSP was actually Microsoft Project, so it was a bit of a battle for a few years to get it going. And eventually we did, and I was working at the OGC and made a load of noise and ended up as the lead author. And so, you know, that was pretty successful, the 07 one. And then just after that, we started to see the APM group pushing out these new types of exams with it multi-choice. And as the lead author, we weren't consulted on how to interpret it and stuff. I remember thinking, this is going to go nowhere, actually. You know, you can see this is not teaching people to be good at programs. That's what we wanted to write the book at. We wanted to share our knowledge. And then the opportunity came up because there was this thing called P3M3 kicking around. And so my second road to Damascus was P3M3. When I sat there and it helped me diagnose why things hadn't worked in my world and some of the clients who'd finally found out what MSP was by then. All right, so so that's how my journey's worked. And so what we try to do is build that back into, you know, I've written these books because I really wanted to actually share our experiences. And the stuff that's gone into P3M3 is an assembly of experience from myself, people like Mike Ward's back there, and all the organisations that we've worked with, where we're trying to actually give you something that actually other people can build on. You know, and possibly the ultimate one this morning was seeing what Hugh was talking about, but there's some clients back there from Sellafield, and quite honestly, they could have told a very similar story. Which we'll come on to. Now, in the early years of P3M3, we talked, one of the first achievements was working out what did bad look like and what was the cost of not being secure. But what I'd like to talk about today is about what we've learnt from those organisations that are beginning to fly and what are those characteristics. Because a lot of those characteristics started some years ago. They haven't come to life as they've got there. They were planning for it. So that's my that's going to be my 10 areas of high performers. But after this morning, I've got some slides just to explain P3M3, because that could actually be some sort of secret code only some of us understand. So the background to P3M3 was there was this in the 80s. This might not be this my version, and it works, all right. Back in the 80s. The US government were commissioning suppliers, and they noticed that some were highly predictable, so they asked for a widget, they got a widget, and others, they might get 3 widgets or no widget, and they couldn't understand what were the characteristics behind them. And so they commissioned this work by Phil Crosby and an organisation called CMMI, the Carnegie Mellon Management Institute, to research these organisations. And what they actually found was the ones that were reliable were process-driven, and the ones that were less reliable, but it didn't mean they were bad because they could be brilliant, were actually people-driven. So that is at the core thinking behind when we start talking about the maturity model at the moment. And then the background to P3M3 was it came out in what was the OGC commissioned it in 2005. The thinking was, well, we're telling everybody to spend all this money on Prince 2 and we're doing all this stuff. Is it actually doing any good? So the first one that came out was very process, quite academically linked back to CMMI. And then in 2008, I got appointed the job of restructuring it and taking it forward for the next version. And all my experiences was that, okay, you need a process, but it's more important that you follow it. And what are the dynamics between writing the process, the tools that support it. And if you go back 10 years, everybody had templates, PIDs, all that stuff, right? But nobody was really filling it in. And you could pick out, when you did an inspection, most PIDs read the same thing because they copied them from one to another. So I really wanted to actually look at how we evaluated organisations, but on a wider base than just, have they got a process? We heard from Kim and others, you get a process. Actually, you can create brilliant processes, but it's getting people to use them. So there's some lessons about that I'd like to share as well. So that was 2008, and we probably did, in the years that followed, we learned a huge amount about what makes organisations tick at the different levels. And I'll talk about what's happening at each one in a minute. And then in 2015, version 3 was a much more bigger and detailed product, which made it less endearing, if I was honest. That everybody could pick up the old one because it was public domain, it's still out there, and people could read it. And what we found was what I did was that instead of a checklist, I wrote them as little outcomes, because when I was designing it, when I was walking around, what would I actually see going on? And I wrote that, and people went, yeah, that's us. But actually, we learned you need to be a bit more, because everybody was coming out at 2. This was the problem. So you needed to be a bit more specific, because the consultants were, not necessarily as experienced as some of the people that are involved in delivering it. So the 2015 model was bigger, but much sharper, and also it helped. Actually, Network Rail benefited from some extent because it was more expansive, and they were much bigger and more expansive. They started to get more ticks in the boxes, because the scope was better for both of us. Okay, so that's kind of the evolution of it. And then people use it for different things, baselining, benchmarking, all that kind of stuff. But if you look at the high-performing organisations, they're using it for all those things. When I originally did the slide, it was like one or the other. But actually, these high performers are really baselining themselves all the time, and they're benchmarking. It's interesting. They'll go out looking at other organisations. They won't assume that they can invent it themselves. Where they want to learn from the industry rather than actually just they want to learn and take best practice and build on it, not invent it, which is kind of sometimes a lot of the lower maturity ones still want to go out and write their own stuff. So it's kind of interesting what we're seeing in that sort of stuff. All right, interestingly, certifying doesn't really get done much, but we've got the detail about 500 organisations and responses to our survey from about 8,000 to 9,000 people. So we've got a huge amount of data about that we've been able to draw on that actually give us pretty lot of confidence in what we're saying now. Okay, so I just kind of talk through the 5 levels. It's interesting, we had to add level 0, right, in this latest version, because we realised that some people weren't even aware they were supposed to do benefits and requirements in some organisations. Now, the logic was level 1, so first of all, you think you need a process, and some of you maybe, we might need programme management, then you get to level, so that's the basic idea. Then you get to level 2, and we get to what we call kind of hotspots. You'll have different parts of the business doing it in their own way. Not invented here is a really good thing. It's a good way to describe this. But also, you could also we interpret that slightly differently now. So we've got that model, but also if an organisation's developed a central approach, but it's only partially deployed, then we call that a level 2 as well. Level 3, you get into consistency. So there's a defined approach, and people are following it. Dream world for some, right? Actually, there's a process, and in Kim's description, I think it was a mod, process for everything, right? But nobody's following them, or they're spending all their time looking at them. That's where it's actually obstructing you rather than helping. And then when you get up to managed, you actually got continual improvement working. But level 2s talk about continual improvement, but it doesn't work because they're not doing it in a consistent way. So what might be an improvement for you and a lesson from you is useless to you. Because you weren't going to do it that way anyway. So lessons learned, all that stuff doesn't work it too. Or it might work within a close team, but it won't work organisationally. So at level 4, we start to see knowledge kicking in. And at level 5, it's basically optimised. Now, one of the lessons that we picked up with optimised, because that's like, you must be brilliant. Do you know what I mean? That's perfect. we kind of realised, and again, a little bit of network house and some other stuff with Sellafield, you think, actually, what does this mean? What is the word optimised, which is the key word? Sometimes you sit back and you kind of stare at it and go, yeah. Actually, it's as good as you can be. Doesn't mean you're perfect. And what we realised was they're in quite heavily regulated environments, so they are they're clunky. We've just been a big government department. They're controlled by politics, not themselves. So therefore, they are in some ways optimised. So they're actually as efficient as they can be within the constraints that they're working in, as opposed to we're brilliant. Yeah. So you take there's this government department, like they said, so we have a minister change, everything stops, and we go in a different direction. So actually, they create themselves in a non-too planned way because they're only ever working at the next to the horizon of the next ministerial change. So another organisation, in a private sector, you're very fluid and agile in the marketplace. Then you won't see big, heavy, robust plans. So we've had to learn to interpret that when we're doing the assessment. So I think since the 2015 model, I spent a lot more time scratching my head, staring at them, right? Not reading the documents, but staring at them. So some of the reasons why people do this, actually at level 1, very unpredictable outcomes, very much like people were talking about, like I said earlier on, you don't quite know what you're going to get. Your A team's brilliant, your G team is well dodgy, yeah? And you're really depending on the team, right? And it's set at the second, basically at level 1, I love the key words, and the amount of times you do this to a board, you go ad hoc, chaotic, and heroic. And then there's mutterings, go, yeah, that's us, right? Because they're out fighting fires all the time, yeah? And actually the journey is so hard out of that world, yeah? And so you can kind of almost see a level 1 organisation by their job adverts, can-do attitude. That means you're going to get something done in chaos, right? So actually, there's some generational things going on. So level 1, ad hoc, chaotic, and heroic. How many of your organisations are ad hoc, chaotic, and heroic? Well done. And the rest. Come on, and the rest. All right? So then you get to repeatable. Yeah, and so now you've kind of got the boundaries of predictability. Yeah, they'll still have a bad one, they'll still have good ones. But it's kind of more, the tolerance is becoming there. And then as you get to level 3, you're starting to be very predictable. And Hugh, as a good example this morning, they're at 3. What's it? 10%, not even 10% failure. Actually, their stats are more like 4. Yeah, because actually they are now stopping failures, right? So, and it managed what you're, sorry, I'll come back. So we've already talked about the hotspots of good practice. And what you're seeing there is, a classic is the IT department, all right? The IT department want to run one thing and everybody else wants to run it another way. And they're completely rigid, right? But but if you just looked at the IT department, they could easily be a 3 or a 4. Yeah, because they've got better and better at being IT, despite what the business wants. Yeah, and despite everything else, they just got better and better at being them. Yeah, so you can actually have, actually, it's quite hard for an organisation across the board to get to a 3. Yeah, you've got to accept you need to be good in the areas that you're good at, which is kind of acceptable. They're spending all the capital. You want them to be good, don't you? Yeah, and if they're not spending a lot of money, then maybe they don't have to be so good. So it's not really a one size. It's where is your risk as an organisation. The lessons that we've got from level 3 is, I remember when we were writing up, a lot of the feedback we had with P3M3 is, this be so rigid, yeah, unable to cope. And back then, that's what I said, well, if you wrote processes that were that rigid, nobody's going to follow them. So you'll never get to level 3, right? Because they won't be following the process. And then all the ones that weren't getting there had processes. They'll bring a contractor in, sort out a risk management strategy. Beautiful risk management strategy. The best one you've ever seen. Nobody else understood it, right? So they didn't follow it. They just carried on the way they were. Yeah. And then the next person writes the benefits one, and then some. So it's loads of these wonderful essays that people don't follow. So you have to be pretty cute to get to 3, which actually both Sellafield and Network Rail have been. All you need is a 1-page flow diagram. That's all that P3M. So you've got a sequence of things that should happen. So, and then level 4, what we're doing, what people are doing then is they're starting to use data. Or at level 3, they've probably got the data, but they don't know what to do with it, and it's unprocessable. In level 4, it's really about knowledge is kicking in. They're valuing the experiences of others rather than dismissing them. Yeah, they're linking training back to their lessons learned. So actually, their training, how it's done around here is being fed by their lessons. And we'll talk some more about that in a minute. And then as you're getting up to 5, it's fine tuning all the time. Yeah, it's never complacency; it's just fine tuning. Okay, so and you can see the failure rates are kind of dropping. So some people, I remember, I think it was the IPA a while ago, referred to it as some sort of scorecard, and it's not. This is about being productive and performance driven, and this is helping you get there. And luckily we've got TFL and various other ones who are happily going public and saying, we are much better from having this approach. Okay, as with Hugh this morning, if anybody wants to bung questions in, just to prove somebody's awake would be good. But all right, but feel free, because actually, I'm going to be moving on and through stuff, so you might forget it. Yep.
Another question. Do you find there are objections to the uptake of improvement that people are afraid of being exposed to the change?
Absolutely, yes. Right. So the biggest problem is the delivery teams. Because when we get onto the things that Hugh, this is about change. Yeah, you are changing the way they work. Project managers have been doing that risk register for 20 years. They ain't going to change easy. There are so many embedded behaviours. So when people get on this journey, they're on a change program. Yeah, you're changing process, people, quite often systems of some sort, and it's all about better management information and performance. So absolutely, it's hugely threatening. And it's actually and that's why organisations get stuck at 2. Because 2's a bad place to be, because you've spent the money to get better, but you haven't got better. Yeah. So in the classic benefits world, you've got the outputs or the capability at 2. And I mentioned this morning, Network Rail didn't really invest much money to go from 2 to the edge of 4 and into 4 in one case. They didn't spend any money. All they did was used it. And what was stopping them? Projects, the delivery teams. Compliance was optional. All right. So absolutely. There was a question back there as well, wasn't there?
I just wondered what the titles of the axes were in graphs.
I can't remember actually. I can't read them. Actually, the one is hang on, let's have a look. No, I can't see. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you in a minute. But one's going to be time and one's going to be cost, I would imagine. All right. Okay. All right. So this is the P3M3 model, and Hugh showed you some diagrams this morning. One of the big changes when I took it over in 2008 was the assumption in the early model was you had to do project, and when you were very good at project, you did programs, and when you were very good at programs, you did portfolio. It was absolutely incremental like that. And all my experiences were just not that. Yeah, BBC and some of our clients, BBC are brilliant at portfolio management, terrible at project management, right? Because they don't really do detail and process. But the higher end stuff, they're brilliant at having a strategy and making it happen. And so, and we've not seen any organisation that scores well on all 3. Now, again, an Uber organisation like Network Rail, it's got the capacity and capability to get there. Most organisations are kind of okay on 1 or 2 of them, and it's where they put their effort. Yeah. So you quite often, if you get good at projects, then you quite often see portfolio coming up with it, which is what they have before. Program is quite often the lowest scoring one by a long way, because people aren't quite sure where it fits. I've heard some of the stuff going on today, and portfolios getting swapped in and out for programs, are they projects? It sits in the middle. You've got to have a real focus on what you want it to be. Otherwise, it lives somewhere in Netherland between portfolio and program. And so what we did was we created a model that you could look at separately. So you can measure projects, you can measure program delivery, or you can measure portfolio delivery. And what we had to design was 7 areas that were consistent across those 3. And within that, there's bunches of processes that we're looking at. And because there's a bunch of processes in there, that's how you can be a 0. Because if you didn't know, people who are big on Prince 2 are really weak on requirements. Yeah, because it's not in Prince 2. So they're not good at benefits. So that set, they haven't got the input, they haven't got the output. So what is it's going on there? So certain bodies of knowledge are weaker in this area as well. So you've got controls, benefits or requirements, which you can do as a project, finance, risk, stakeholder, governance, and resource management. So those are the 7 areas that we measure against. And what we've learned from this is, what do you reckon the lowest score in one is normally? What the two, well, either, right? What do you reckon the lowest score in one on most assessments is? Pardon? Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, not always. Yeah, well, you've thrown me there, right? So it could be requirements. But that wasn't the one I was thinking of. It's, people always kind of go, oh. Give up? Resource management. All right? Because people throw bodies at things rather than measure and develop, right? And so our thinking is, well, actually, quite often it takes, you get your governance in, so you've got controls of your projects and programs. Then you get them under control, well, and then you get your plans working, and actually it takes a while for the resource one to kind of stop being red on your thing. All right, the other one, interestingly, is somebody did say then was stakeholder. And bearing in mind the question there about problems with projects and program managers wanting to change, where P3M organisations are pretty terrible at stakeholder management with their outside community, let alone their internal people. So there is a fundamental weakness that I think is inherently part of the change thing. All right, and so when we designed it, we kind of wanted to link process, people and tools. So the low ones that hit level 3 are in balance, basically. They've got it kind of working. The level 2 ones might be heavier on one thing or another. They might have spent loads of money on training. I remember looking at one, they were paying everybody through training. They went back, there was no framework or anything, no standards for them to work to. So therefore they did what they wanted when they came back to work. Everybody that went on a course made the situation worse. All right? Okay. Everybody okay with that? Oh, that's coming. So how am I doing for time? All right, we're okay. We've got a bit of an idea about P3M3 and what it's all about now. Yep. Right, I'll nod. There we go. That's good. Okay. All right. So now I want to move on to. I picked out. I was sat watching a few of the Network Rail conference, and I was thinking about what we'd learnt while we'd been there with them, because they did a lot, and we'd done a lot with Sellafield, and we'd been doing stuff with others. And you know, sometimes you just let your brain flow around a bit and think, actually, what have we seen about these high performers? What's different about them to the low performers? Yeah, which is kind of floats around P3M3, but I was sensing some other things around it, because actually in P3M3, if you want to organise yourself as an improvement programme, P3M3 is basically telling you what to do. It's not telling you how, so you can do it in lots of different ways, but it's saying what it's going to look like when you've done it. And some of these things are in there, but there were some other things that took me a bit by surprise. So that's what I wanted to mainly share with you today. Now you know where all the data's come from. So the first one was really committed leadership. And I remember the stuff about change this morning. And one of the kind of best statements I heard about leadership, they said, well, leaders are followers. Yeah, which is kind of blooming obvious, isn't it, really? But actually, it's always stuck with me, and I was thinking about the ones that I've been in, very different types of leaders in some of these organisations, but they do have followers, and they do create that. Now, in some of the cases, there has been a burning bridge, and actually people had to jump. And in other cases, it's been much of a softer unfreeze. And this stuff about Lewin just kind of works to me. You know, you actually unfreeze that organisation. I think the comments this morning about actually in the modern world, well, one of the problems with change, you can't freeze it again. That's the problem. It becomes unfrozen and flows all over the place. But certainly in some of the and engineering organisations, and I tend to be a bit tougher to unfreeze, because they're a bit more mechanical and process driven. So in theory, you can change the process, but actually they don't change. So that's one of the things. If I looked at why those worked, it's because there was a why you were making this change. I mean, I'm thinking about a big global consultancy we worked with that was coming together, and they were actually looking, they bring together a big wide group of other consultancies around the world. And their message was, we're doing programs. And why are we doing programs? Because everybody else does projects in our world. And if we do programs, we can start nibbling away at that top tier of the KPMGs. We can start getting up into their world rather than just being good at projects like everybody else is. And I thought, actually, there was a real why in there. And Hugh had a real why in there. And Sellafield, they got a real why are they doing this? So people can then follow that. Yeah, but doing program management, because it's the issue du jour, as one of my staff called it, every time I come up with everything. Yeah, today's issue, it'll only last a few weeks. But they've got a long-term commitment to that, okay? And as they're dealing with this, it's quite interesting about signposts. Do you know what I mean? There's things that we don't accept anymore. I remember when we did the Network Rail one the first time round, I remember a director going, oh, yeah, he said, compliance is optional. Yeah, and then then it became non-optional. So these things started to change, and that's what led to it. Okay, and also, it's always remember that there's 3 layers in an organisation. You've got to get the top people on board, then we've got the delivery people, but there's a whole bunch in the middle which I called a permafrost, which are the senior managers, and they don't want to change either. But they don't want to change because they're too busy. They're getting hit from the top and the bottom, and they are the ones, for me, that you have to attack. And that's why MSP is so big on the BCM, because that's them. All right? So that's committed leadership. This was one that I really was intrigued about, was self-critical, somewhat restless, and also a bit intolerant. And we did a workshop with one that were on the edge of level 4. And I remember being in there, and my colleague was running, oh, we haven't done this, oh, we haven't done that, oh, dearie me, oh, this is bad, that's bad. I was thinking, oh my God, what's gone on? We've just gone horribly wrong on this, right? We're overrating them. And then I listened to them, and I thought, no. This is why they're actually up at that level. It's because they know what's wrong. Yeah, whereas if it was a level 2, they'd have a big why. They were really quite specific about what needed to be fixed as the next piece of work. And they were analysing their performance and being really critical of themselves. There was no complacency, even though they were the best one in that organisation. So it's kind of a kind of unexpected one, but when you think about it, they wouldn't have got there if they hadn't been like this. They didn't tolerate failure, lessons learned, you have missed it, intolerance. Okay, so that's that one. Learning organisation was another. So if you listen to Hugh and some of these others, if you go to a level 1 or 2, they'll think, oh, we can invent program management. We'll do it ourselves. Yeah, or we'll get some freelancers in, they'll fix it for us, and it'll be done in a year. But you look how long it took Hugh to get that moving. Yeah, and don't forget, I was involved 4 years before that. So it takes, they're actually looking at the other world and not assuming they can invent it themselves. So they try and stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, by taking it, and they refine rather than try and invent. It's kind of, what's Network Rail? They're at the heart of every piece of commercial collaboration. They're in there learning from everybody else, trying to lead the way, but learn. Sellafield is similar, and some of the other clients we've worked with, they're trying to hang out with the good ones to try to learn from them. All right. So one of the interesting. I'll come on to that one in a minute. Level 4 is about analysts and measuring performance, and so those higher end ones. And there was the discussion with, I forgot your name, about automated intelligence. And I was at an APM thing yesterday when they were talking about it as well. Now, actually, if you look at a level 3, they've probably got the data. But sometimes, because they haven't put the systems in early enough, they can't process the data. Those higher end ones are analysing it, and they're looking for those opportunities to improve. And then, rather than just seeing it, oh, well, we've got the highlight reports, we'll just look back. Yeah, we're job done, on to the next month. But these guys are reading it. It's very crazy, isn't it? Reading highlight reports, and looking for opportunities. And the other thing around that is they're not just measuring, and I think Kate mentioned looking at failure. They actually analyse why it was successful, which is quite what went right on that one that we need to make sure goes right next time, or did we get a bit lucky so we shouldn't get complacent? So there's that kind of aspect to it too. Developing their people, so it's actually as a competency frameworks. They're not randomly sending people. We need project. We'll stick them all on Prince2 and APM. It ain't going to make any difference. These guys are targeting, and they're targeting it at performance as well, and they're using their knowledge and lessons learned to burn back in to what they're teaching on the training courses. So they're continually improving. where I went to next. The other thing was respecting assurance. And I think some of the other consultancies, it's really tough doing assurance in these places because they really, first of all, they're integrated. So they 3 lines of defense, it's there. They're wanting to stop things go wrong, but they want to stop it because they want to learn as well. So they have gates. But as an external doing a P3M3 or doing an assurance, finding the good stuff to tell them, it's easy on a level 1, trust me. Do you know what I mean? I could write the report before I get there, right? And most 2s, 4s, those 3s into 4s, you're really looking for those fine-tuned opportunities, and it's much more effort to make that movement. But what they have got is momentum. So they've got the people behind them by that stage. So they can do it. Then we got curating the knowledge, which is, if you look at when I did I mean, it's really, for you guys, worth going to our website and looking for this case study on Thameslink, because they learned how to deliver program management themselves. They built the models themselves. And then last year, at the end of the program, they all went on the MSP course to get their CV sorted. I went, guys, brilliant. Yeah, we love it. We had to learn that. But like I said, if you'd done it in 2011, you probably would have thought it was rubbish. You know what I mean? Because you now know that it works, because you've had to get there through the pain. So they're really much sharper on this, and they're working out how to cycle the knowledge around and what's going on in the sectors that they need to know about. So this curation of knowledge, and everybody talks about lessons learned and knowledge, but it's so important. But you've got to be good enough to be able to use it. Yeah, with some. We also did a paper on lessons learned or knowledge management from there, and it was just about how they disseminated it, and actually how they were learning and what made sense. You know, a lessons learned report, unless if you don't think of the audience, won't work. Yeah, because you think, oh, I would have done that anyway. Yeah, but there's nuggets in there. How do you manage those nuggets? All right. They also know their limitations. This is the other thing. You know, one of the really interesting things was at Network Rail was, because they looked around the industry, they traditionally did their risk management, same as with a risk project. Oh, it's scale. Yeah, how much is it costing? God, it's a big project. But actually, they started using a technique from IT called the Shenmar model, which look at complexity, pace, previous experience, and they started using that model in their world. Totally changed. They went from 500 high risk to 100, which meant they could target their assurance. And actually, those haven't been going wrong. So they've been really smart in the way they've done it. And and obviously, other ones that we've seen have done it. But as you've heard Hugh, then I just got to fill in the gaps a bit. All right. So, but I mean, they were really that Shenmar in a different sector, and it worked. We'd already put it in somewhere else at the time. I was really surprised to find it, but it really worked. All right. Other things, clear lines of authority. Their decision making gets. Yeah. Sometimes regulated industry can't do anything about it, right? But actually, these are kind of the more private sector ones, or the ones that are not regulated, because everybody knows their authority, they are more productive because they don't spend hours at meetings, so they know whose job it is. So that person is making a decision. It's not a communal, it's theirs. Yes, those lines of authority are really important for getting stuff done. All right, I'm racing a bit at the moment because I'm running out of time. And the last thing was they know where they're going, right? They set that vision out, and they know what they achieve. And we've just helped design the improvement journey for a big government department. And what they wanted, they said, we want something we can measure every year. We're going into this. It's going to cost us a lot of money. We're bringing in a supplier to actually help us get up these levels. We want to know where we should be each year, which, it's actually in P3M3. You could just, it's not written. With interpretation and knowing what we know about the rate of change, we know where they can be if on a reasonable schedule. And by using some stuff, they can plan short term and long term, because they can see some value. And the value in all this is you're saving money. You're becoming more. The productivity thing. Well, no, that was rambling. We're the least productive country in the world and all that sort of stuff. Just everybody get out and use P3M3, they become really productive. All right, but that's what we're seeing. Those companies that get up there, and these are the things. If I was saying, these are the 10 things that people need to think about before starting on the P3M3 journey. Because if you're thinking about them at level 1 and 2, they're liable to turn up at. You're going to get to level 3 or 4 and enjoy the benefits. Okay, 10. So a quick summary there. Any questions?